Intel versus AMD. It's that long-heated debate between PC builders, PC gamers, and content creators. How you decide in such a complex market as this is really the big question nowadays. When Intel's finally given us kind of sort of an answer, right, to what we've been asking for, and with response to Ryzen, because Ryzen was an answer to Intel, and Intel really had nothing for a long time to combat that. But now that Intel does have something, I mean, you have to start weighing out cost and value, and it can all seem a bit overwhelming, and that's why this video exists. If you're on the fence about either, hopefully we'll be able to clear it up for you. Stay with me. To get rid of that annoying Windows activation watermark, head on over to VIP SCD Key and purchase a Windows 10 Pro OEM key for a fraction of the price of retail. Just use a secure payment method like PayPal, enter your product key into your PC settings window, and say bye-bye to the watermark. And be sure to use our offer code SKGS for a sweet discount. So here we go, Alder Lake, good stuff, yeah? I don't think that the die-hard AMD fanboys can deny the sheer horsepower 12th gen Intel chips are packing, but there are obviously a few problems, namely with the platform cost and optimization associated with the introduction of the new architecture. See, for those who aren't aware, Alder Lake utilizes a big little architecture, similar in basic form to what you'd find in most cell phones today, where some CPU cores are extremely powerful and others are extremely efficient in an effort to save battery life, which really doesn't matter in the case of desktops because they don't have batteries, except from maybe the motherboard, BIOS battery, CMOS battery, whatever. And depending on the processes running at any given time, these P and E cores trade off tasks to maximize power savings for as little performance loss as possible. See, Intel's been running a bit toasty lately. They've been known to pull a few more watts than maybe what they say they do on paper. And so to combat this, to an extent, again, that's why the E-cores exist. So you have a bit of a weird nomenclature here. It's no longer just like physical cores, or logical processors. You actually have to distinguish between which cores you're talking about here. So P-cores have hyperthreading. E-cores do not, which means that chips like the 12700 and 12900Ks have slightly unorthodox logical processor counts. I was a bit skeptical of its design at first, but the higher core count chips in particular seem to manage just fine. I'm actually streaming on one right now, and I've had really nothing but the occasional like file explorer hiccup where like the whole desktop will just kind of freeze for a few seconds. I have to go in and restart the Explorer and the Task Manager, and then everything's fine again. That's literally the only hiccup I've run into in an entire week of using the 12900K in here, and I'm on Windows 10, mind you, not Windows 11. We'll talk about that in a bit later. And then there's the other elephant in the room, games. They absolutely love fast cores, and since most are sub-optimized beyond 12 or so threads, it means that even Core i5 Alder Lake chips are performing incredibly compared to 11th gen Intel and even Zen 3 CPUs. But here's where the water becomes a bit brackish. Despite the fair prices of Alder Lake chips, and I think most of us can agree that these prices are fair, with the exception of third-party scalpers, their accompanying motherboards are still relatively expensive. And at that, the only available SKUs pre-2022 are those that are unlocked, which means that we only have Z690 chipsets to accompany those, and because of that, it means that if you want to adopt an Intel platform early on, you have no choice but to pay more for the higher chipset, higher end board that you might not really want out of the gate. And of course, the Intel fanboys will say, oh, well, that's because you can only buy the unlocked SKUs out of the gate too. Well, okay, and to that I say, it doesn't really matter what AMD board you buy, as long as it's not an A-series board. Any B-series board will allow you to overclock just the same as any X-series counterpart. So you have a bit more going for you there in the AMD department. I don't really see any other argument that a Team Blue fan can have. So if you're dead set on adopting the new Intel platform going into 2022, which again, I don't really think is a bad decision, you just have to weigh the pros and cons relative to when you are deciding to adopt. I personally don't think it hurts to wait a month or two for new boards and new CPUs to hit the shelves. This added diversity will likely affect product availability as well, meaning we shouldn't see as many third-party retailers flipping chips for several $100s over retail. In particular, we're talking about the non-K SKUs. We'll even see some more F SKUs come out, which are the ones that don't have IGPs. All of this will kind of balance out that market a bit. But the real kicker in the teeth at this point for me is DDR5. And it's being treated almost like graphics cards at this point, and it's because there's so little of it in supply at the moment, and there is a bit of demand early on. The early adoption has its benefits, sure, but Again, I think that an obvious consequence is higher prices on account of initial manufacturing constraints of entirely new processes, basically. So while DDR5 is extremely fast, and again, the new modules look appealing, that's the whole point. They want to make them look flashy so that you buy them. I believe it's in your best interest upfront to avoid DDR5 if possible and opt for DDR4 motherboards supporting Alder Lake. Yes, they exist. And yes, performance is still fantastic. In our own briefings, in fact, with Intel, they've cited very little difference in terms of performance, especially in everyday tasks, between the two memory generations. This may obviously change as faster and more efficient dies are produced, but if you're looking for a 12th gen platform out of the gate, your best bet in my book is to stick with a board that supports DDR4. And remember, you cannot mix DDR4 and DDR5 on the same board, even if it looks like everything fits snug, which in theory it should, because I don't think the dimensions have really changed at all. The pinout is totally different, and that's no bueno. And speaking of DDR4 and DDR5, be sure to check out Team Group's latest giveaway, which you can join via the link in this video's description. Simply vote for your favorite products, watch the video on YouTube, and complete simple actions within Gleam to enter for a chance to win a gaming PC or DDR5 kit. You can even enter an email address to earn up to 10% discounts via special coupon codes for your favorite Team Group hardware. So be sure to click the link below for more details. But anyway, I think the fact that Intel chose to retain support for DDR4 in its Alder Lake architecture was an excellent decision. It's likely they foresaw DDR5 shortages out of the gate and didn't want it hindering a launch they felt could stand on its own. And it certainly does against the competition, albeit at still higher, generally, power usages and temperatures. See, Intel's still the hotter choice. At least in my case, the 12900K runs hotter than my 5950X, which is a higher core count chip, mind you. Now, as for AMD, by this point, you might be thinking, well, this is old news, Greg. I mean, we want the latest and greatest, and Team Blue has it. I mean, why would we look anywhere else? And sure, that's fine. That tends to be how a lot of people think. But is it the wiser choice from a budget standpoint? See, I think it's easy to cast aside any notions of value for the sake of obtaining the objectively best thing out there. But you're always going to pay a bit of a premium for the best thing out there. Intel knows that their chips are the best right now, and they're pricing their products accordingly. It requires little in the way of critical thinking, and it makes you feel good for a little while, sure, until something better is released, as is always the case with technology. To be completely honest, if it wasn't for the fact that much of what I do here requires extensive long-term testing, I'd still be on Ryzen, likely far into 2022. The 5950X was incredible. The 5900X is incredible, especially for that price. And look, it's still a very versatile architecture. How AMD managed to reduce core-to-core latencies by increasing core count per CCX is just mwah. It feels as snappy as the Ring bus in everyday use, finally, and absolutely slays at video editing thanks to an affinity for higher core counts. I honestly can't think of a single issue I have with Zen 3, to be frank with you, apart from the fact that it, at least now, is no longer objectively the best all-around workhorse. But you know what? That's okay. It's fine. It really is. I mean, look at what AMD's done in response to Alder Lake's launch. They've lowered their prices. That's fantastic. The 5900X and the 5950X have both been marked down by nearly $100 each over the past week. Now, a part of this has to do with Black Friday and Cyber Monday, but don't tell me that that timing is coincidental entirely, because it's not. I expect similar discounts to stick around until EOL, end of life. That's the benefit of external competition. We just haven't had much of that until recently. So, even if you're still for Team Red, you're diehard, you only see red and that's the end of it, you can still thank your opponents for spicing things up a bit, because it does help you as well in terms of price. All we've been asking for is choice. Those of us kind of hovering in the middle. Those of us who have purchased based on value in the past have been cornered into red territory for quite a while. And look, that was fine and dandy because Ryzen's generally been great. But with viable competition from across the aisle, expect more frequent and aggressive pricing strategies from both camps going forward. It's a win-win. So I think either choice is a great one going into 2022. Honestly, it really just depends on what you're currently sporting and when you plan to buy. If you've been sporting, for example, a Ryzen 5 2600 for a few years and you want something a bit juicier, consider a 5600 or a 5800X. Chances are you can still use the same board you're currently running with a BIOS update, assuming it's like a X470, B450 board. A lot of BIOS updates out there that will let you run the latest M processors with them. You also won't need to swap RAM, and you won't need to deal with early adoption supply constraints where applicable, which means prices are going to be generally competitive. And since Alder Lake is fresh, more or less, it's unlikely we'll see any deals in the immediate, and we didn't really see any during Black Friday, Cyber Monday. I'm not surprised. It's a new product. Now, if you're on something a bit older, say a Core i5 2400 or an AMD FX 8350, you know, in that ballpark, maybe older than that, your next platform will likely depend on other factors, maybe power draw, maybe sheer performance, maybe even availability in your country. You can also run a quick calculation in your head. If Alder Lake maybe is anywhere between 5 or 10% faster on average than Zen 3, which it appears to be, at least in my testing and others, I shouldn't be paying any more than about 5 to 10% more for Team Blue's platform. Kind of makes sense, right? If you are, then I'd be choosing Zen 3 all day. And if you aren't, maybe it makes sense to pick Alder Lake. And especially if you're going to be adopting Windows 11 earlier, it seems to be a bit more future-proof with regard to operating systems because those P&E cores are better optimized in Windows 11. I'm using Windows 10, so I've kind of stunted my growth a bit, but I still feel that there is a benefit here. And in my testing, the 12900K is actually a bit faster than the 5950X in Windows 10 in video editing. So that's saying something. Granted, most of that work is now offloaded to the discrete graphics card. But anyway, I really hate using the phrase future-proof because it's just tossed around like it means nothing anymore. But if you intend to stick with Windows 10 for a few more years, maybe that's a case for you to stay with Ryzen since it doesn't really it doesn't really benefit you to upgrade to Windows 11, but if you are upgrading to Windows 11 and you're considering Alder Lake, I think that's a perfect match. There are so many things you could be and probably should be accounting for, and I'm just glad that we finally can have these deliberations again. It feels good to talk like this, although I've been talking a bit fast, I apologize. I'm really excited to see what else Intel throws our way in early 2022 around their latest architecture, but if it all turns out to be one big letdown, I mean, we still have Ryzen, and that's, it's not like Ryzen has even remotely sucked recently. With that, let me know how you feel about the current state of affairs in the desktop CPU industry, and yeah, I'm looking forward to those conversations in the comments section. If Alder Lake is on your radar, let me know. I'm curious. If you just have been all about AMD, let me know, and let me know why. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing, and I'll catch you in the next one. My name's Greg. Thanks for learning with me. Should I just end it there? Okay, I'm going to end it there. Cool.